Thank you to the Arizona Self-Storage Association. I'm very proud to be a board member and also a member for my company. And I'd also like to welcome Amy Amadeo as our interim executive of the Arizona Storage Association. And it's just a real pleasure to be here today to talk to you about this. And this is probably my fourth COVID-19 presentation, and every one of them has been different. It is so fluid and things are changing regularly. So I want you to know that the information, literally, we have been changing this in the last 10 minutes, we've changed this webinar. So please understand that if you're passing this out a month from now, everything may not be the same. But today, this is absolutely accurate and up-to-date information that we have. And I'm thankful to have Richard here to also help me. So let's get started talking about information about the virus itself. I think what's so interesting about this flu is that we hear more and more information. So we sort of have to change and reevaluate as time goes by because we hear a fever, cough, shortness of breath, and that's me when I just take a walk or run around the block. But really, the transmitting hands to face, it seems like, and I was so amazed that just soap and water works for this virus. But we're talking about also 80% of the cases are mild, and it does involve the public health. And so that's why it's so serious to be at how quickly this thing has really produced a lot of deaths and a lot of people sick in the United States, and more so in the most populated locations, the people that are still, having a lot of interaction with others. So we want to try to fix that. So what we're dealing with is first the virus, the COVID-19, the issue of social distancing, because it's so important. And now in Arizona, we have 4 weeks of shutdowns of a lot of businesses, except the essential businesses are open, quarantines for those who are sick or exposed, and a state of emergency. And 48 states so far have called for the state of emergency. And a lot of the reasons they do that is not just because they have so many cases, but just the fact that they get funding and that they can all use different directives and get more help to be able, as a state, if they call it a state of emergency. So the state of emergency in Arizona is really when the government or the officials feel that there's action needed to be taken urgently. And that has happened in Arizona. And typically when the disaster has occurred or event that might be severe enough to need aid or drastic action, the declaration's made. So this authorizes our officials to speed up any assistance and communities to make resources available to whoever needs those. And our Governor, Doug Ducey, has said that self-storage is an essential business. And thankfully, Richard Marmer has really been active for so many years, but in this issue also. But this is a letter that he sent out that Richard produced and sent out and gave us information about what Governor Ducey, that is not an easy name to say very quickly, issued. And so we want you to understand about a critical trades or people who, and believe me, these are people who actually store with us, not just that we are essential, but even the people who store with us. When you look at plumbers, electricians, exterminators, cleaning people, janitorial staff, government entities, security staff, there are lots of these people who actually store with us. So not only are we considered essential, but many of the people who store with us are in critical trades. So yesterday, an executive order was put out by Arizona Governor Ducey again, and the governor basically said stay home, stay healthy, and stay connected. So he wants us all on the internet, and he wants us not having parties on the beach. Well, we don't have a beach here. Well, yes, I mean around some lakes here, but generally speaking, he wants us to not be so active. And I know that even with my daughter, she's in high school and she's still, trying to do stuff with all of her friends. And I said, no, that's, just stay home, hunker down and do the best you can. But the government had a press conference and announced the further executive orders, and businesses and entities to remain open shall implement rules and procedures that facilitate this physical distancing and spacing of individuals at least 6 feet. Yesterday I was in Fry's, the food store. And so because of course I heard this go out and I realized I had better run to Fry's before everybody else goes and nobody gets anything. But the weird thing is they already had on the floor the 6 feet away where everyone had, and all the way down the aisles too, not just up in front. But so it was pretty amazing that they were already ready. They already knew that this was coming up. But all businesses that are classified as essential functions may remain open and maintain operations, but shall establish these and implement social distancing and sanitation measures. And I'm going to be talking about those today. So essential worker documentation is not needed. Just so you know, under this policy, you don't have to go around with a badge or anything like that. I thought this little t-shirt was so cute. I'm an essential worker. So basically kind of a big deal, but not really, in self-storage, that's what we think. But anyway, I gave you the information that came out of Governor Ducey's executive order. So here it is. It basically says that, if you're essential, and it gives you more information about it. So
Carol, if I can jump in here for just a moment.
Oh, yes.
On
Yeah,
that
let me
last
go back.
slide. Yeah, move back one
Yes.
slide.
Yeah.
Notice item E, it says no person shall be required to provide documentation or proof of their activities to justify their activities under this order. That has two different meanings. On the one hand, it means that essential workers are able to go to their jobs, but it also means that customers who need the essential services are free to go and get them, and they don't have to justify the fact that they're going there.
That's a great point, because not only do we need to be at work, but our customers need to get to us. I know my daughter's at a storage property in Tucson, and she's been renting. In fact, one day last week, I think she rented 6 spaces in one day. So, but she said they're keeping social distancing and doing all of their, basically most of their rentals are online. So I love that fact.
Yeah.
So safe work practices. Safe work practices are really typically administrative controls that we include procedures for safe and proper work, reducing like the duration, frequency, or intensity of exposure to any kind of hazard. So one of the things here is providing resources for the work environment that promotes good hygiene. For example, providing tissues, the no-touch trash cans, hand soap, alcohol-based rubs, things like that. Even if you go into Walmart or any stores now, they have the wipes out there so you can wipe down the carts, those sorts of things. So they are providing some of those, and we need to do that for our customers too, if we can find those products. That's the hard part right now, right? So remember, we're requiring regular hand washing or use of alcohol-based rubs. You as workers should always be washing your hands. And if they're visibly soiled or after removing, we don't have PPE really that we're wearing, or maybe some of you may be. I don't know if you have that, but that's personal protection equipment. So because they haven't told us that masks are effective, but they really are effective for the essential workers. So somehow I think the masks might be important. It's somewhere along the line. Remember, but post hand washing signs in the restroom also, because people need to realize, or remember, it's a reminder. Sometimes people get in a hurry, but again, reminding them to wash their hands is a good idea. Well, stay healthy and limit the spread of germs. And I think that's, again, by making good hygiene a habit, washing your hands frequently with soap and water, and covering your mouth and nose with a tissue when you cough or sneeze, and putting the used tissues in a wastebasket, not just leaving them out somewhere, and cough or sneeze into your upper sleeve, or if you have a tissue, do that. Clean your hands off after coughing and sneezing. Use soap and water or alcohol-based hand cleaner. And it really needs to be like 20 seconds, you sing a song. if you can remember do the happy birthday song or whatever. I had to change up songs because that one was getting boring. So, but stay at home if you're sick. I mean, that's another thing, really, find someone else to help you go get your groceries or get help, something like that. So, because you don't want to expose other people. And so why do people need storage in a crisis? And I have to tell you, my son and I, 2 weeks ago, were in Houston doing some work in storage when, we weren't really supposed to be out. But there were people who need self-storage. And we talked to people that were actually moving things in. And here were some of the things that we found. Some of them were businesses for filling orders. This one lady in particular said she had sold her home when all of this started happening. And then what they realized is they didn't realize it would sell so quickly. And she said, and now all the homes that were up for sale, the people didn't want someone coming into their home. So they were closing down showing homes because of the virus. So she said, we haven't been able to find a home. We've only been able to look at a couple. And because the people were thinking, well, after that person comes in, we got to clean everything up again. So I found that to be pretty fascinating. Anyway, the other thing was being evicted from an apartment. Hopefully no one's evicting anyone at this point, but at the time, there was a gentleman at the stores in Houston that were evicted from an apartment. And customers also getting their business tools, merchandise for their clients, and college students who've been forced out of dorms. So they, instead of normally coming at our, after May, when we have the big influx of those students, now we're having them now because they were required to get all of their stuff out because they just closed down the schools. I know my daughter's school was as effective yesterday that no more school to the end of the year. So people who are now at home and are organizing, they're finding that they need more space, or they're at home with nothing to do. And one of the people at the storage properties was renting a unit, and she said, yeah, we were at home and we just were so bored. We decided to clean out the garage, and then we realized that we're never going to get both cars in here unless we get storage. So they decided, instead of staying at home, they were going to go get some storage space and move everything. So good for us, I guess. And how about the hoarders? I got this picture a week ago on the left. One of my friends in storage sent that over, saying that they saw this guy hoarding toilet paper. This was a Canadian friend of mine. But I find it amazing that this happens. But again, it just, there's an overflow, I guess they're going to put it in storage. Someday we're going to open that up and try to sell it, and we're going to be like, oh no, it was a hoarder. We're going to have to sell a bunch of whatever, and they won't get as much as they paid for it, or we won't. How about operating the self-storage during a crisis? I think what's hard about this is that storage across the United States, and into Arizona included, is completely different from a big city to the small rural stores. And there's not one answer for everyone. So I can't tell you everyone's got to do it this way, because it's not going to work that way. And, owners have their ability to say, hey, one person in the office at a time, or whatever their, choice is, the way they operate. But I kind of liked this example because it was a inside area where you could have customers that they're not going to be really typically 6 feet away, but it's a big bay that will have an area where people don't have to even get too close to each other. So again, the answer will vary based on your location and store operations, but keep in mind that we have very few customers coming in the office daily. And if we need to help them and not get too close or see a bunch of people together, maybe we could break it up. But generally, I don't think that's going to happen. Remember, storage operations during a crisis. Some of the things that we can do, the gate access keypads allow the customers to enter without contact to employees. So that is a wonderful thing to have. So you got to keep those gate access going as best we can. I've heard someone recently said, hey, we want to shut down the gates so they have to come in and we know who's, I'm like, no, that's the beauty of having the gate access of the keypads. But keep the office open, and maybe with even one employee. You don't have to have multiple employees there if you don't want to. Couples probably won't have an issue if you have a husband and wife working at the store, because they're with each other all the time anyway. But if you have individual employees, maybe you stagger those out where there's just one person there at a time. And remember, our countertops tend to be a fair amount of distance between the employee and the customer, and that helps. But you certainly now can mitigate that with other things here. And I want you to remember the social distancing we're looking for. Just stay calm and be smart about this. You don't want someone, and I love this thing because it shows the intimate space, which is way too close to have customers. And it's got the 4 feet, which is personal space. But even the personal space, we're kind of asking for a little bit more than that. So we're looking for 6 feet, like a tall man distance between you and the customer. So think about that. And so you may not want to take someone out in the golf cart because the person's sitting right next to you, though they're facing forward, they might turn, whatever. But if you decide that, instead of using the golf cart, you may say, you know what, we're going to walk and just walk a little further apart to go show us space. So, but the social distancing is so important. One of the things about the social distancing and the information coming from the state of Arizona is they want you to try to place things on the floor to show customers how far to stand away from each other if they're actually going to be waiting. I know McDonald's is doing that. They put a line out front inside their, you would think just the drive-throughs open, but no, just people can come inside also, but they have red lines to where the person's supposed to stand when they're ordering, but they're not allowed to eat in the store itself. So place lines on the floor in the office if you'd like to, and you can buy these online. You could make your own. You could just put some duct tape down there, I guess, if you want to, but you have some things that are, stand behind this line. You can find those out there on the internet. So also, washing your hands. The virus is really fragile, and it's got a protective layer of thin layer of fat around it. And that is why the soap and detergent works, because it breaks down the fat. And by dissolving the fat layer, the protein molecule disappears, or disperses, right, basically, and breaks down on its own. Heat also melts fat, so it's good to use water that's warm, like 77 degrees they're recommending Fahrenheit for the washing of your hands, your clothes, everything. And in addition, the hot water makes more foam also with the soap you use. So I can't imagine that washing your hands is so effective, but when you think about how you get something into your nose or mouth, your hands are they touch everything, and it really does make a lot of sense. I guess I just think that that's amazing. But I think protection from virus, I think as managers, if working in this environment, if you said, yes, I'm going to be working, I'll do that for the company, you may want to say, I want to use gloves and I want to use a mask. So self-storage employees have that option of wearing the protective masks or gloves around with the customers. And if you feel that you're at risk, especially because of your age or poor health, discuss that with your supervisor or owner, because maybe you're not the right person to be working there during this time. And I don't mean that in a bad way, more of a way to save you and to help you be healthy and safe. But if you have these underlying health conditions that because you're older, you have something amiss. And I found out the other day that I'm in the older category. I was like, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry, elderly. I think, gosh, I don't feel elderly. So anyway, I'm in that category too, unfortunately. That's just the way life is, isn't it? Now, how about things that we come in contact with? People have asked me, well, what about all the things that are coming into the office? Because we have deliveries of boxes and things like that. Well, I wanted to give you some information. So basically cardboard, the life of the virus on the cardboard is about 24 hours. And it's noteworthy because many customers are using online delivery services to get things to the store. And we also, at the storage property, we get merchandise and things delivered. Like if you have Chateau or whatever company you use, they're sending you stuff that's packaged. But remember, you get something like that when you take it out, and especially if it's merchandise that you're hanging up, like your locks and things like that, wipe those down. You can wipe all of those things down and clean them off as you put them up, but use gloves. I would use gloves through doing this whole process. But if you're holding it for a customer, I would just say use the gloves to take the boxes, wherever you're putting them, whether you put them in a storage space or leave them in the office and call the customer. But that will help you get around the virus being on the cardboard. Now, again, I mentioned the gloves, good for, where you're storing, watch where you're storing the boxes and make sure you're wiping down your merchandise. Don't forget that too. So how about plastic? Because we do come in contact with plastic on occasion in self-storage. We very often, I put this example up here because it was a basket from a supermarket. So these types of things, I'm surprised to know that it's like 72 hours, 2 to 3 days. And that's kind of, worrisome when you're picking up a cart and using it. So I try not to touch it. Sometimes I do it with my elbows, which I don't think really works either. So, but remember, there are other things like food containers, light switches that are plastic, cell phone cases can be plastic, elevator buttons, but those things, it can stay for 72 hours. So be very diligent about knowing that can stay on those types of things longer. Now, steel is 3 days, another 72 hours for steel. And again, we interact with things that are steel for sure. Our gate operators are typically have some steel around them. The keypads, I meant, not the operators itself, but they actually touching the, keypad to get in and out of the gate. How about operating in tough times? Well, this is just like singing my song. I think you need to sanitize the bathroom, the countertops hourly, or after a customer comes. And remember, have soap actually in the office, in the restrooms for the people to use, and provide, good stuff, the decent stuff, if you can find it now, hopefully. And remember, remove the trash. I took this picture like 2 weeks ago at a store that I went to. I think this bathroom's filthy to me. I just think it's ridiculous that I think that picture was taken about maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock. That was last night's trash. So that should have been out. That should not be in the morning looking like that for sure. So, and a great idea is to put customer use pins and in a basket or sanitize them, like the ones that you put out there for customers to sign a check or something like that. I noticed at one of the properties that I went to, they had a little basket and it had a note on it say, put used pins in this basket for sanitation. So afterwards, they were sanitizing after the customers used them. I thought that was a great little idea there. So the gate and door access keypads, these things need to be clean. And I picked these pictures off of the internet because these are nasty, dirty, all three of them. Actually, first I thought that PTI one was pretty clean. And then I looked again and like, look at the 3, 4, and 5. That grime has been on there a long time. And I'm thinking the virus might just hook onto that and stay there. I don't know. But I think those should be completely clean all the time. Customers shouldn't have to feel like they have to use their knuckle or have to get a Kleenex out to use it, anything like that. I mean, this is whether there's a virus or not. But these keypads, I think if you have customers going in and out, you need to be out there constantly cleaning it. That should not look like these do. And these two in particular, I'd actually replace those totally. They're in bad shape. But remember, keep everything clean. And I'm going to give you some examples because I was driving my daughter nuts the other day. I was like, well, if you can lean, you can clean. Because she said, Mom, there's nothing to do here. I said, oh boy, there's always cleaning to do. Sanitize the office, the countertops after every customer leaves. But during the day, do doorknobs, bathrooms, kiosks, elevator buttons, both inside and out. Because the elevator buttons on the outside, my daughter was doing those. I said, did you do the ones on the inside? And she goes, yeah, I forgot those actually. And I thought she was so proud of herself, but she was proud of herself because she was cleaning. I was proud of her. But customer coffee machines too. If you have one of the Keurigs that the customers can use and make their own little coffee, clean that stuff off. And again, the pins that I mentioned and putting them in the basket, but wipe also down the keyboards that you're using throughout the day, especially if you have an assistant coming in or someone else using it. But stair railings and countertops, and again, those carts definitely need to be cleaned after people are using them. I have a quick note to tell you because I was going after my daughter about getting cleaning. And so then she went into the restroom. This was a couple of days ago, and she found a hypodermic needle on the floor. And she called her supervisor. He was gone. So she called the next best thing, which was me, which she probably hated to call me, but she did. And so then I said, go over to the fire department because there's a fire department right next door to her. I said, run over to the fire department. They'll come over and pick it up for you, but lock that door. Go right now before you go there. Lock that door so no customer or kids or anyone goes in there and touches it or gets it. So she did. And I was so proud of her because she was clean. She was checking it to clean it and she found that there. And what a bonus round that is for her. I was like so excited for her. She took on something difficult and she made it through well. A little test for her. Now, how about handling new customers? I still want to get new customers. I don't want to close down the stores. I want to apologize maybe for not shaking their hand when they come in because I kind of like to do that, but greet them with a smile. You can do that. That's a great way to greet people and say, love to shake your hand and welcome, come on in. But do try to keep that 6 feet between you and the customer. But still remember to show the space. I know some people have said, oh, I don't want to go show the space. But the problem is when you go out and they see the space or they're not sure which size, it's better not to rent them the size that they're not going to be using or that you have a transfer. So it's much better just to show them the space, keep your distance and just follow some simple rules. Now, how about self-storage doing our part? I think businesses everywhere are really stepping up and doing things during a crisis, trying to help. But the self-storage industry certainly wants to be part of that. And here's some sort of policies being adopted by some Arizona operators. One of the things that we are recommending is the waiving the rent is really not being suggested, but there's circumstances where practicing some leniency where it's appropriate. And I think Arizona is also strongly urging you to implement some other measures here. And Richard, you may want to chime in here because this is near and dear to our hearts. We believe
Sure.
that this is really important. Richard, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, this would be a really good place for that. Thank you,
Yep.
Carol. First, let me answer probably your number one question, and that is self-storage in Arizona deemed an essential business that is able to stay open during the crisis? And the answer is yes, we are deemed an essential business. Under the governor's list of essential businesses, he has something called critical trades, and those include uh, uh, other service providers who provide services that are necessary to maintaining the safety, sanitation, and essential operation of residences, essential activities, and essential businesses and operations. And we all know that virtually every essential business out there, whether it's medical or even the police, rent storage spaces from us. So accordingly, the governor's office has advised us that they acknowledge that we are indeed deemed an essential business. To that end, the governor in his speech just yesterday, if you were listening, talked about an agreement that he had entered into with banks, suspending all foreclosures for the next 60 days. While ASA was not part of the dialogue with the governor at that time, we are advising the governor's office that in the spirit of that agreement, and given the governor's attitude with respect to foreclosures, that self-storage deems itself to be under that agreement, and that we are suspending all auctions for the next 60 days. We strongly direct that you not do auctions for the next 60 days. Nobody should be at risk of losing their possessions as a result of the coronavirus. There are some other things that we're recommending as well, and that is that we suspend all rent increases for the next 60 days through April and May. Suspend increases in our street rates for the next 60 days. You should also encourage people to use online payment and electronic payment means whenever possible. Our recognition as an essential business is subject to our following all of the governor's rules and the things that Carol has been describing about safe practices. So we really are under an obligation to follow these practices.
So he mentioned a couple of the things I'm going to about rent increases, suspending all of those. And don't forget when you do that, some of you that have it, that it's in your software, don't forget to suspend the rate management software, because you have to go actually into, you may say, oh, I'm just not going to do anymore, but the computer could be set up to do it, and you'll need to manually go in and fix that. And if you can't, maybe your owner can. And again, remind customers of different payment methods, whether that's your website, mail, telephone, however you want to do it. There's a $2 bill. Haven't seen one of those in a while. My mom gives those to my kids for Christmas. They do not understand that at all. So, and how about accepting cash payments? Richard, this is another thing that's come up recently. And this may be a little inappropriate, but due to the rising temperatures, we will not be accepting any boob or sock money. So customers do have the right to pay in cash. That is one of the things that we do know. But the problem is that how do you handle the cash? I think, again, if you have gloves there, you can certainly use your gloves to handle the cash. Lots of people like to pay cash. I don't know why that is, but I do on occasion, but not that often. But I do like cash. For some
Yeah,
reason. I don't know.
you,
Richard, you wanted to say something else about that?
no, I was just going to comment that I do know of some operators who have said that they're going to refuse cash out of a sense of caution. It's actually federal law that you
That's
have to accept payments for pre-existing debts, and you can notify people that you won't accept cash for something in the future, but you are mandated to accept it for anything in the past. So I guess Carol's rules about being safe in handling is probably the best recommendation.
Yeah. And it's so odd, Richard, because I think the strange thing is like some companies say no checks, some places say no credit cards, and then some say no cash. So you don't really know. I try to keep all of those things going. But yeah, we have an issue. There are some customers that just pay in cash and deal with. We need to figure out how to deal with that or let them know in advance. One of the things that I think is so important is keeping all of you in the people that are on the in the trenches at the storage properties, keeping you healthy. And I think that there's some strategies to work with that because considering this is a pandemic at this point, they want to look at the severity of what's going on, but it may mean sending symptomatic employees home if they have symptoms that they're sick, they're coughing and things are, doesn't look good for them. Send them home. Don't leave them working anyway. And sometimes that may mean you have to shut down the office. I've had to do that on occasion. But implementing self quarantines for employees returning from high risk areas, if you have someone that's coming back from a certain area, you may have to say, you know what, I just can't have you at work until you've gone through 2 weeks of whatever. So, and limiting face-to-face meetings if you can, like as far as a company goes. And you could even try doing reduced office hours, but I think it's a good idea to let people know. And we have so many emails now, so you may want to email the customers and tell them, because of the virus, this is what we're limiting our hours, office hours, or shortening them a bit. There may be some things like that you can do to make it a little easier to run the property. But I wouldn't change the hours so that they get in and out of the gate. But that's how I feel about it. But you know what? I'll tell you. So my daughter calls me up the other day and she said, "Gosh, it's so slow. There's nothing to do." And I'm like, "Oh, there's always something to do." So I have a little chart here because I think, you know what? If your store's slow, now is the time to work on some projects. So one of the things that I think that you need to do, go and do a file audit. Look for the accuracy of every rental agreement. So what I do is I print out a list of every tenant, and you can do it however your filing system is. I'm assuming that you may have it by unit number, something like that. So if you have it by unit number, then you print it out by unit number and make sure every single person that says they're renting there they have a rental agreement and all the other files that it looks accurate. I guarantee you, when I go do audits, I find constant and just rare that I found someone that actually does 100% of the files are all there. So, and how about organizing just the other office files? And again, there's cleaning and organization of your maintenance rooms, your office itself. You can continue doing physical inventories of the property and making like your merchandise look good. May say, hey, let's like clean all of this off and redo it. So there shouldn't be any boredom. That's what I would say. And if you have any signs out there that are sort of handwritten, not very professional, order some signs that look good and put those up. And remember, we have some great training videos out there. So if you're bored with nothing to do, we have a YouTube channel that you can go to, and it's on here. It's www.youtube.com, user skill check services. You can find all kinds of things to listen to about self-storage. Nobody else would want to listen to those, but lots of storage people will. So here's some things to remember about precautions and keeping you and your customers safe. Try to social distance to 6 feet. You can wear masks and gloves if you can find those. Hopefully we can. Washing your hands constantly and cleaning. This will really help keep us and the customers safer. And remember, you can do your part here. And I take a lot of pride in what we've done in self-storage through a lot of different things. From 9/11, there's some times where our industry has really stepped up and helped our customers and helped the government to protect, our livelihood. So one of the things I'm going to recommend here, and Richard had recommended, is suspend all auctions at least 60 days. Suspend planned rent increases for April and May at least 60 days. Again, there also. And inform customers of what's going on. Not, you don't have to tell them about the increases or the auction stuff necessarily, but you want to let them know if your office hours changed, your gate hours changed, payment methods, something different on that, you can let them, but you need to keep them informed and interacting with them. Protect yourself also, because you're on the front line, and your customers by cleaning and doing practicing social distancing and washing your hands like a crazy person. And remember, There are symptoms. You know the symptom: fever, cough, difficulty breathing, muscle pain, tired. So if you have these, go to an emergency room or let your owner know so you can get some help and get you out of the office. But if the AZSA wants to also say, there's some risk involved in practicing, we want to reduce any risk that we have. So reduce anything that you do that could be bad and practice good hygiene, cleaning as much as you can, the social distancing, and there is a reward to this. The time of helping people in need, it really is a great service to our customers, and there is a huge reward. I have talked to probably more people in a long conversation, even waiting in the line in Fry's, because I have waited almost 30 minutes to check out. The gentleman and I know where he worked. I know that he was getting his food for his mom and dad. It was amazing the interaction that we had and other people were having in line. But you have to remember, we need to be empathetic. During this time, you have to have empathy. Your company needs a plan of action of how you can help customers in dire need. And we're talking about these people they don't have jobs. These people that have worked in restaurants that are completely, the waiters and waitresses, they're the people at Macy's or wherever you go to shop. They don't have a job now. And this is why so many times in my lifetime, I have been thankful I've been in the storage business, because we've stayed open in these really difficult times and we've stayed strong even in recessions. And it's just been an amazing business to be in. But I also want you to have patience. These are stressful times and they cause people to be difficult sometimes, and be understanding, because they may be typically they're in some kind of issue anyway if they need self-storage. And remember, we're going to overcome this, and let's stay safe though and emerge from this crisis and being better. I think we're all going to be better, and our kids are going to be better at washing their hands and thinking about things that they're doing. So we can do things to prevent this, and that's the social distancing, washing hands, going to the doctor, exercising, and getting good sleep. And we need our storage employees to be happy and healthy. So thank you so much for joining us. We would like to answer some questions now, and I really appreciate Richard being here, because he is our legal eagle and just amazing at answering these kinds of questions. Is so level-headed in what he does. So do we have questions coming from the audience?
We do have questions, absolutely. Let me go back up here. The first one, I'm pretty sure you covered, but just to make sure that the attendee heard your answer about auctions. I know you mentioned the 60 days. They have an auction scheduled already for April 23rd. They've sent all their notices. Is it okay to proceed? The tenant has ignored all contact, and they know he's receiving their registered emails. They think he does not want his property. Does that, 60 days still pertain to them and all that good stuff?
I would say yes. I strongly urge them to cancel the auction and wait 60 days and restart the process at the end of 60 days. Here's the situation. It is very clear that the governor's office is very, very sensitive to people being at risk because of the current situation. And he's issued orders about no evictions, for example. There's no residential evictions allowed for the next 60 days. He's entered into an agreement with banks to suspend residential, or not just residential, but all real estate foreclosures for the next 60 days. It is obvious that their office does not want to see people having their property at risk. We do not want an auction from self-storage to be brought to the governor's attention and have them rethink whether in fact self-storage should be deemed essential or not. So I strongly urge the people to just suspend the auction. Don't do it.
Richard, may I add on to that? I've managed a lot of people, and I just, by the way they phrase that whole thing, is like they don't want it anymore. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes people don't respond to things because they don't have the money. They don't. It's difficult for people to admit things like that, and it's so. I am 100% saying same thing Richard is. Do not do auctions now. And canceling an auction is as simple as just saying, okay, we're not going to have the auction. Call up if you have an auctioneer, call them up, say, hey, no auction. If it's online, don't put it online.
Some facilities have the pay over the phone fee. I didn't hear that discussed. I know you talked about late fees, but what about the fees for paying over the phone when they normally don't do that?
Again, I would recommend suspending those kinds of fees. In fact, for that matter, I would recommend suspending all late fees as well. Don't suspend rents. I mean, we're not suggesting that at all. But late fees, anything that we want to encourage people to use online methods and things like that. Putting a fee on top of it is a discouragement, and it's a minor fee. We can live without it. So I would recommend waiving that.
I think, Richard, it's so important to have options, right? If someone can't get a check in, or they don't have a check, they don't have checks, they're trying to call in to give you a credit card. And I find it sometimes ridiculous. And I know there are a lot of big companies that do this too. And it's penny wise and pound foolish in this, at where we are now. You want to get payment in any way you can from customers because of this dire situation everyone's in. So forget the fee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spoken like a true supervisor, right?
How about suspending overlocking past due tenants? Should they suspend overlocking?
Well, that's a good question.
That's a
Richard?
good question too.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, there's nothing legal here.
Right.
This is a personal sentiment. The argument that we made to the governor's office that got us deemed essential was that these are places where essential businesses store their things, and it's also where people very often have their personal reserves, the things they might need to call upon now in a time of crisis. And overlocking really would be generated in part as a result of crisis. So what we'd be doing is separating people from what might be very important in their lives. And for a few dollars of rent for a month or something like that, I don't think it's worth it. I wouldn't do it. We want to be the good guy in this scenario.
Richard, I'm with you on that. I would probably, with my stores, I would just say 30, 60 or 60 days. Let's just do our best and not worry about the overlocking, because the other issue is if we overlock someone and the managers or the office isn't open and they can't get their tools of their trade, then that's problematic, I think. So, and
Absolutely.
they not, so I would say again, that just be lenient. My gosh, this is a time of terrible things for our country. So I think we need to all do our part.
Okay, this is kind of along the same lines. Should we accept partial payments for rents for a while?
I would.
I would too.
The only time that I discourage the acceptance of partial payments is if you are in the course of the foreclosure process. You've sent out your first notice and stuff like that. But if since we're suspending auctions, there's no harm in taking a partial payment. And in some senses, you could be helping a tenant out. So
absolutely.
Yes, I would accept them.
Me too. Ditto.
Okay. Question about gloves. We all know there's kind of a shortage of gloves out there. When using gloves, shouldn't they be removed and replaced every transaction? Wearing the same gloves all day is just spreading whatever you have come into contact with.
Why don't you wash your hands with the gloves on?
That's what I've heard too, is washing your hands with the gloves on.
Here's one that says, this question was kind of answered. I have a tenant and the unit is scheduled for auction April 8th. They did get an email saying the items in the unit belong to somebody else, that at this time, I think they're in jail. She said to just throw the stuff out. Can or should I auction it?
Well, there's two different issues on the table here. Okay. The first one is, can or should she auction it? The answer is not for the next 60 days. Okay. Now, it's 60 days from now, and we're moving forward because things are better. So then the question is, what can you do with contents? You only have one option under the law with respect to contents, and that's to auction them for non-payment. It doesn't matter who technically owns the contents, because our lien is on all stored contents, not necessarily tenants' property that's stored in the unit. As I've said many times in many other forums, that we don't know who owns anything behind our doors. And so therefore our lien is on whatever is stored in the unit. So the ownership is not an issue. It's just, we're not going to auction now, and later when things resume normalcy, then go ahead and auction.
Yep.
Have you guys seen success so far from people running the office from on-site apartments? So the manager's just kind of doing it from their on-site apartment.
I think that depends on their technology. If their technology allows someone to rent literally from the website. I know in my daughter's case that a lady came in and my daughter said, "You want me to help you?" Because they're all completely digital. In fact, they even open the spaces with like a customer's phone. They get in and out the door with a phone. So she has the ability to do that. But I'd say most storage properties in Arizona, I bet they're not that high tech. And so, yeah, I don't know that that should be so easy.
Let me add one observation, and that is, being deemed an essential business is not an order to stay open. It's a permission to stay open.
Mm-hmm.
But in so doing, if you get sick, we have a funny balance that we've got to maintain. If we acknowledge that in fact we're an essential business and the people and businesses need to get to those units, then the facility in some way should try to stay open. But what you may have to do is close your office and accept whatever limitations that puts on you in terms of the operations of your office. But to the extent possible, I would still try to keep the units available to the public, to your tenants, because that could be critical for lives, literally.
Yeah. So maybe the office isn't open. I would also say, let's say you have an assistant manager, maybe that's, if you're, I'm just going to say older, let's say you're older and in a category where you feel like a little threatened, you should talk to the owner about it too. They may say, "Hey, we can fill in some," they may find someone to help you in this interim of this time. So I think there are other alternatives, but you also should be discussing that with the owner.
Yeah. But if you have to, if you've got to close
Yeah.
the office because that's the
Yep.
safe thing to do for the public, you close the office. Leave your gate open.
The gate open. Yep.
Yeah, but you close the office and go with it.
And leave them some way to call. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's a problem, leave a phone number for someone that's monitoring, because who knows what issue they're going to have. Some people can't remember their code. Well, what are you going to do about those? I mean, that happens almost every day at some stores.
Yeah,
People
you
are
do
like,
what
"Yeah, I
you
forgot my code."
Yeah, post signs, do what you can to help people,
Yep.
but if you got to close the office, you've got to close the office.
Okay. Speaking of phone numbers, Carol, we do have a couple more questions, but can you advance to your last slide just so people have a minute to write down yours and Richard's phone
Yes.
numbers in case
Sorry.
they need you? Okay. Richard, this one might be for you. It sounds legal. What about the FFCRA for medical leave for our employees? Any info on how this affects our business and obligations to our staff? Poor Carol, I don't know.
I don't know as I sit here, but I will certainly look into it, which brings up a good point. We're posting information for members on the website as we learn it, both on the front page and then behind the firewall for the members only section with what current information we have. So as we learn more, we'll put it up there.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Okay, here's one. If we have a part-time staff who are elderly, should we hire temporary staff to cover them at this time?
Well,
Carol?
my feeling is, I just told you I'm in the elderly. I'm 59 and I'm in the elderly category, sort of. I think it's 60 and up, but I'm close enough. But I think the interesting aspect of this is that you need to interact with your employees and talk to them about how safe they feel, how healthy they feel. If they're in a category where they have underlying conditions, I think they need help. I think maybe they need to take some time off or whatever that may be, what it looked like, but bring someone else in. And I know that's not easy to do. Or maybe the owner steps in and says, "Hey, I can help." It depends, like the size of an operation. I know when I had 36 or 38 locations total, but when I had that many stores, I had the ability to move some people around in certain locations. So when having multiple locations, it certainly helps. But if you have just one store, it makes it much more difficult to do that. But I think there's always you should have a backup, or someone, owner or supervise, someone needs to know how to run the office and to run the operations just in case something ever does happen. So this is a good time to make all of that happen.
Okay, I've got an answer to the FFCRA question. Under the FFCRA, which is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, for up to 2 weeks, 80 hours, or I'm just going to read directly from, this is where is this a release from? This is a release from the Department of Labor. Pardon me. Generally, employers covered under the Act must provide employees up to 2 weeks, that's 80 hours, or a part-time employee's 2-week equivalent of paid sick leave based on the higher of their regular rate of pay or the applicable state or federal minimum wage at 100% of this is a little, now you got to give them 2 weeks if they get sick, paid leave. And eligible employees, in general, employees of private sector employers with fewer than 500 employees and certain public sector employers are eligible for up to 2 weeks of fully or partially paid sick leave for COVID-19 related reasons. This is all getting a little technical. What I'll do is I'll put this up on our website, and you can take a look at it.
Is it discriminatory to make elderly leave their position?
Well, if you pay them,
Yeah.
no. I mean, if you're paying them, there's no issue. If you make them leave and you don't pay them, yeah, I would say the answer is probably yes. So there's your answer in my view.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues wrapped up in that, because as an employer, if you have someone older and then they say, "Hey, I've got these underlying conditions, I don't want to work, or I can't work based on that," I would let them take their vacation time or whatever, and I would bring someone else in.
My last words on the subject are, let's stay safe and emerge from this situation proud of the part that we played.
I love that, Richard, because that really says who we are as an industry, is how all of us act, and taking the high road. That was something that I learned from my parents. They were all believers in, better to do the right thing than feel like you've won because you did something you wanted to do. And it really, we want to be a good industry to our customers. And Richard, thank you so much, because your input's always so important and timely in this this case. And I think that it really helps all of our AZA members to hear from you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yep.
Appreciate it.